So Chris Wallace interviewed Trump. He's honestly one of the least objectionable people on Fox News. But this exchange that you're about to see is so telling because it highlights the faux adversarialism of the establishment press. So he did have his moments in this talk, to be fair. I think he gave a fair line of questioning on Trump's treatment of the media, and he, made a pretty strong case for the First Amendment and free speech and a free press. So credit where credit is due on that front. But what you're about to see here is the framing of a question that does nothing but serve deep state interests and the status quo and business as usual. So let's take a look, and then I'll break it down.
You've talked a lot already about the cemetery and the fact that you didn't go because it was a security concern, and you did go the next day. Here's the thing.
No, excuse me. Not security concern. They wouldn't allow me to go.
I understand.
They said, sir, Secret Service said, sir, you cannot go. We are not prepared. You cannot go, because it was supposed to be a helicopter, but the helicopter couldn't fly because of zero visibility. Okay, they said, sir, you cannot go.
But here's the question. You're back in Washington on Monday, Veterans Day. Why don't you go across the river to Arlington for that ceremony? Barack Obama went every year he was here in D.C.
I should have done that. I was extremely busy on calls for the country. We did a lot of calling, as you know.
But this is Veterans Day.
I probably, in retrospect, I should have. And I did last year, and I will virtually every year. But we had come in very late at night, and I had just left literally the American Cemetery in Paris, and I really probably assumed that was fine. And I was extremely busy because of affairs of state, doing other things. But I would have done it.
Why haven't you visited our troops serving in war zones in Iraq and Afghanistan in the 2 years you've been in office as Commander-in-Chief?
Well, I think you will see that happen. There are things that are being planned. We don't want to talk about it obviously because of security reasons and everything else, but there are things that are planned. As you know, I was very much opposed to the war in Iraq. I think it was a tremendous mistake. It should have never happened. You're right. I don't think anybody's been more with the military than I have as a president in terms of funding, in terms of all of the things I've been able to get them, including the vets. I don't think anybody's done more than me. I've had an unbelievable busy schedule, and I will be doing it. On top of which, you have these phony witch hunts. On top of which, we've just been very busy, but I will be doing that.
So look at the kind of questions that Chris Wallace asked there. Why didn't you go to the memorial event in Paris? Now, to be fair, that's a reasonable question to ask, but at the same time, this is what consumed the media for days, and this was their main focus. And the heart of that story is what? Trump is really impolite, and Donald Trump is really selfish, and he's not presidential. That was the point of that. The next one was, why didn't you go to Arlington Cemetery for a ceremony on Veterans Day when you were here? So that's two questions with the same underlying assumptions and the same perspective of why aren't you being more presidential? Why are you being impolite? Why are you being uncivil? Why are you, maybe if the harshest interpretation is why are you being selfish as opposed to being selfless and going and, being with the troops and honoring the troops? And then the third question was, why haven't you visited the troops in Iraq and Afghanistan? So if Chris Wallace was doing his job, which would be, in my opinion, properly, you ask these adversarial questions where there's real substance there. Now, when Trump said, I opposed, he originally said, I opposed the wars in Iraq. And I don't know if he said Afghanistan too, I think he said Iraq only. I opposed the war in Iraq. That's where a real journalist would fire back and say, so why do you still have the troops there now? Oh, I opposed the war. So then why aren't you bringing all the troops home right now? Again, if you wanted to be adversarial in a way that made sense, Instead of questioning Trump, why haven't you gone to visit the troops? We all agree the troops are awesome, right? So go visit the troops. Why aren't you visiting the troops? If you really were serious, you ask something like, Mr. President, according to the most recent poll on the war in Afghanistan done in 2013, 5 years ago was the last time I saw a poll on Afghanistan, only 17% of the American people still wanted to be in that war. That war is more unpopular than Vietnam was. So given that those are the facts and that the Taliban still controls 40% of the country and that there's no definition of victory, why are we even there? Mr. President, why are you keeping us in these wars which you ran against on the campaign trail? Mr. President, define victory for me in Iraq and Afghanistan. Mr. President, if you really want to support the troops on Veterans Day, why not take them out of harm's way from an illegal and unnecessary war? See, if the media was actually doing their job and being adversarial to people in power, that's what they would ask. Instead, look at the framing. The trick is not in the actual question, it's in the framing of the question. What perspective is the framing from? And it's totally pro-establishment. Oh, you didn't go to the memorial event in Paris, why aren't you being more presidential? Oh, you didn't go to Arlington Cemetery, why aren't you being more presidential? Oh, you didn't visit the troops in Iraq and Afghanistan, why aren't you being more presidential? Listen, man, that's all of those things are a bullshit framing. They really are. They really are. It's fake adversarialism. You're not being adversarial. You're just saying, hey, follow the norms better. There's no substance there. There's no there. It's just make us feel better by following norms and being presidential. Fuck off, man. Ask something real. Lives are at stake. Really question why we're still in these wars when the public doesn't even want to be there anymore. But there's none of that happening in the media. It's not just Fox News. It's throughout the entire media. Nobody even questions the fact that we're still in these wars anymore. And that drives me so crazy.